Hi, this is Andrew Gumbs. This is episode 6 of the Artificial Intelligence and Cybersurgery Podcast. I'm the editor-in-chief of a journal called Artificial Intelligence Surgery, here with my co-host, Dr. Vincent Grasso.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's Dr. Vincent Grasso here. Excited to have our sixth guest on. As Dr. Gumbs said, this is the AI journal, Cybersurgery Podcast. We are the only medical journal, surgical journal dedicated to artificial intelligence. So this is a very exciting time for us, and welcome Paul to our podcast.
So Paul, we met through Moon Surgical, actually. So we've already talked before, but Vincent, this is the first time that you're meeting Paul. So Paul, I was hoping you could tell us and whoever's listening who you are and why surgeons who are inventors like Vincent and I should get to know someone like you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on as a guest. I appreciate it, Andrew and Vincent. So just quickly, my name is Paul Grand. I'm the CEO of MedTech Innovator. We're an accelerator, but we're what I would call a downstream accelerator, meaning that we're not looking for people who just have an idea and are looking to then figure out how to start a company. We're looking for people who are up and running and who have a company of some kind. It could be super early days, that's fine, but we're looking for people who actually have something that is what I would say is established, meaning generally that you've got prototypes, maybe even some early evidence that what you're working on is actually gonna work. It doesn't have to be, huge studies. It doesn't have to even be clinical. It can be bench data, animal data, cadaver data, but we have something that looks like it's going to work. That's kind of the right staging for us. And so I guess, the brief version I'd say is that we're incredibly successful at taking companies at that stage who we, along with a very large ecosystem of people who I would say are best in class around the world in terms of evaluating technology, over 400 or 500 people that evaluate technologies for us every year. We're very good at selecting companies that we think are going to have an impact and then providing the right resources so they're successful. That's why I think surgeons who have an idea and some, as I said, are not just an idea, but they've got some efforts underway, and they want to see that technology succeed, not only in reaching the market, which is the first thing, but also with the right value. I think that's why you'd want to know us.
And where are you located? And how long have you been doing this?
Yeah, I'm physically located in Los Angeles. We've been doing this now since 2013, so this is our 10th year. And just quickly, I'll say, in those 10 years, typically you'd see maybe a third of the companies or so, actually, succeed or still be in business. But in our case, 95% of the companies that have gone through MedTech Innovator are still in business or have been acquired. We had acquisition number 25 yesterday.
Oh my goodness, that's an incredible statistic.
It is. It's unusual. It just means we're either really good at picking companies or we're really good at helping them. But either way, it's some combination of the two.
About how many companies do you work with per year? And then Vincent, I'm sorry, I'll let you go, but I'm so curious.
Yeah. So for us, we have multiple cohorts. We have one cohort that's focused on entering the U.S. as their primary market. So the companies can be based anywhere. We have companies, as far as Australia and Southeast Asia, participating in that, but mainly U.S. and European companies. That's 50 companies a year that are part of that cohort. We have a program that's focused on the Asia Pacific markets. That's 20 companies a year. We have a biotools cohort that's 15 companies that'll be in that program this year, which are developing life science tools technologies. And then we have a couple specialty tracks, one in plastic surgery that'll be 3 or 4 companies this year. And we have a pediatric track of 5 companies. So all told, we're talking 85, maybe even 90 companies this year in this year's program. So a lot of companies, 420 have been through MedTech Innovator to date.
I'm speechless. Vincent, help me. That's amazing.
Yeah, this is super for our audience. So but you do, as Paul, as you mentioned, you engage with companies that are obviously further along than just a pitch deck, right? They've got to have something working. Can it be a software app, or does it have to be a hardware, product, or a combination of both? Where is that of interest to you guys?
Yeah, we're of interest. What's of interest to us, I should say, is everything except for biopharma. And as I said, we do some work in that space in terms of the enabling technologies, the life science tools. But it can be a software app, absolutely. It can be a software system. It can be an enterprise system. We're trying to do things that are improving healthcare outcomes and in economics, ultimately. And we like things that have a patient benefit. That definitely is going to be, heavily high on our list. But maybe the thing that would be most helpful is to say that I like to say that anything that would be regulated by CDRH, if it's regulated, would fall under us. So, on the med tech side, so all that health tech stuff is regulated by CDRH. So that's kind of under our banner. And then ultimately, the other thing to think about is that we're a bit of a corporate accelerator. And what I mean by that is that we have 27 corporate partners, companies, let's say like Edwards Life Sciences and Johnson & Johnson and Becton Dickinson and then a lot of the, Olympuses, those kinds of companies. We have 27 partners. And we're looking for what they're looking for. Because they're the ones who are going to be working closely with these companies. They're going to, work very, the companies get to work very intimately with those corporate partners. So if they're interested, we're interested.
So as you know, I'm based now in Europe. Vincent's based back in the States, and I'm obviously American, and I've moved to Europe. I'm curious what kind of obstacles you notice, or maybe benefits that you notice in Europe, and vice versa. I mean, let's just maybe specifically talk about Europe and Asia. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what the differences are.
Well, for the longest time, going back a decade or so, there was this big trend for people to do their early work in Europe. U.S. companies, I'm saying that it was easier to get to the European markets first in terms of a regulatory path. So a lot of people for many, many years have been going to Europe. That's been going on for a long time. I think that pendulum has swung, especially with MDR. And so now people are back in the US. And I think that was one of the big initiatives that FDA was to make that change, because they saw that patients were getting market access first in Europe. But despite that not being the market focus for those companies. And so it's a lot better aligned if we can do our clinical studies here and do our early, because people do tend to put their marketing efforts to where they get their devices approved, and to where there's and where their clinical studies have been done. So, I definitely think that's changed quite a bit, but we still have plenty of companies in Europe, both European companies and US companies that want to access the European markets. NHS in the UK, is really interesting for a lot of companies. So we see a lot of people piloting there and doing work there, because they're able to, penetrate an entire system and not just, one small area, which is, that's the advantage of Europe, is that, you tend to have like, oh, you get approved and then everybody can have access to something, versus here, in the US, we've got a, kind of a wonky system when it comes to payment. And that makes things a little more difficult and challenging here in the US.
But the UK must be a pain in the what now that they're no longer in the union, no?
I can't speak to whether if it's harder in the UK than it was, post Brexit. I don't know if it's become harder or not. But I do know that in general, people are, as I said, they're focusing more on the US as a market entry point now, and less on Europe as well. So I'm definitely seeing that as a trend.
So what about what types of things are you interested in robotics? Are you guys focused on really big robotics, on handheld robotics? I know the pharmacy departments, they love their robot, just for medication delivery and all this thing. So I'm just kind of, I mean, if you're able to kind of a broad idea of what kind of interests you, or maybe even where you see the markets going, if any of that's possible.
Yeah, well, you'll be happy to know that the place in robotics that people are most interested in, and this kind of goes for all areas, are things that have AI enabling them. That's definitely a thing. And it's not just a buzzword that people are, if you don't have AI somewhere in your, not just your roadmap or your, kind of like vision, but your actual product and your actual work, then it's starting to become suspicious because, AI tends to be better than typical algorithms for a lot of these things. So we're definitely seeing AI all over the stuff you're talking about, robotics, et cetera. I think robotics we're going to see everywhere. You and I talked about that, Andrew, last time I think we had our conversation privately, but that was the idea that at some point in the future, I think if there's not robotics involved, it might even be, a liability where people say like, why did you do that surgery without some kind of robotic assistance?
Absolutely. With some artificial intelligence oversight. Yeah.
Exactly. It's that, I think you said this when we were talking, but it's something I say all the time too, which is kind of like, having that, like, those sensors and data that's able to say like, oh, there's a critical structure, you were about to cut or you're about to puncture. And those brakes are there to guardrails to, prevent, the people from doing damage. So like how could you not take advantage of that? Like it just, as I said, I think there's a point at which people will say there's liability if you don't do those things.
And that's part of the benefits of, I see researchers here in Europe. I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I work with some guys in Germany, and they're developing basically an intelligent varus needle, to inflate the abdomen with carbon dioxide so that you can do minimally invasive surgery. And in Europe, they were trying to like get people interested and the surgeons, the doctors, nobody was really interested in it. And I was like, I mean, in America, they're going to love this thing, because just like you said, if something goes bad and you didn't use this device that could have prevented it in America, I mean, that's a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. And so it's very interesting what you say. It's very interesting to me how things are different in different regions.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know of any other insights you can give us in maybe Asia and South America. Any things that you notice that are kind of glaring that might be helpful for us to know?
Yeah. On the Asia and South America side, we're seeing tremendous innovation. It tends to be regional, and in its not just its application, but its kind of a like competitive view of the world. So like we're surprised often to see things that have been done 13 times by other people in other places, and yet people are doing it presumably for the first time in their eyes in their region, in some of the places in India and other places around Asia that we'll see, and we'll say there's all these other companies solving this problem. They'll go, well, they're not here. And so we see an opportunity, and so they're developing their solution that you go, wow, I can't believe so many other people have already solved this problem. So we tend to see a lot of that. But it's not. Someone recently said to me, they were remarking about China, and they were saying, oh, China, it's all copycat of just our technology, and it's not. It's not. There's a lot of fresh innovation. We have, our annual accelerator program always culminates with a series of competitions where our various mentors who've been working with these companies over 4 months nominate certain companies they've been working with and say, this company is really exciting. They should be in your finals competition. And it's a big high visibility thing. And there's awards, and we give away $1 million in prizes every year, non-dilutive funding, which is a nice reason to apply. But the visibility you get in those competitions is really good. And we hold those competitions in Asia, in Singapore.
It sounds like Shark Tank.
Yeah, it's like the Shark Tank, exactly. Except it's not like 3 judges, or 4 people or whatever making a decision. We let the audience vote for the winner, and the audience, it's at the APAC Med annual meeting, which is where the senior leadership of the entire ecosystem is in Asia, from all across Asia Pacific. And so the audience picks the winner, and this past year it was a Hong Kong company that won. So, it's not, and that was for an innovation for, in that case, it was a company that basically is developing a way of getting drugs into the eye without injection. So basically enabling, all sorts of therapy for people who today, 45% of patients just turn down drugs that would improve their vision or stop some deadly disease process in their, not deadly, but high deficit disease process in their eye. But people say, forget it, I don't want those injections. But now you have
we can talk about COVID and vaccines with that. I mean, I have a good friend of mine who will not get an injection. I mean, it's like, what are you talking about?
Right. Nevertheless, an injection in your eyeball.
Yeah, exactly.
No one. But the point is, so innovation, my point, I guess, about Asia is this, that all the data is saying that Asia will be a bigger market than the US and Europe combined in like the next 5 years. So, so if you're not entering that market, if you're not thinking about being part of that market, it's a mistake. So if you're European, if you're US, and you're not looking at Asia, I think that's really a missed opportunity. And as I said, because the people in Asia are like, hey, the competitors aren't here, we're just going to innovate, they will take over these markets. So we've seen like really cool surgical navigation systems for brain surgery and all sorts of things where you go like, hey, like there's a lot of companies that have solved this outside of, India and other places. And they're like, well, they're not here and we're going to dominate the market before they get here. And maybe they get acquired by that company eventually. But, there's just a lot of innovation happening. And it tends to be that frugal kind of innovation that, you go like, I can't believe you developed a surgical navigation system for the brain that, took you, a year and a half and $400,000. Like,
right. And not
do that?
Not $4 million. Yeah.
Or $40 million or $70 million. Yeah, it's crazy to see how far. We always say that every time we look at one of these companies that pitch us in Asia. Almost in every case we say, it was a fraction, it was a tenth, of the development cost that we see elsewhere.
So I know Vincent is salivating hearing you. He probably wants to save all of his questions for offline, but for someone like us, I mean, Vincent and I, we create AI solutions right now is what our main focus is. For someone like us, Vincent, what should we be asking this guy? What can we reveal, I guess, to our listeners? Well, what are some good things that we could ask him now?
Yeah, I think selfishly, I have a whole bunch of questions that we'll have to talk to Paul about. But I think for our audience, I think, Paul, you would agree. Andrew and I, we're physician technologists, right, with some business acumen. Andrew's very modest. He just finished his master's in AI, and his focus was the use of conversational AI in the preoperative space, which is a big problem, right? So we're surgeons, and there's so much opportunity there, requires focus. Physicians have relationships, right, with potential alpha and beta sites. They know lots of people, but we're not trained in medical school or residency on how to think as a business person, how to take a concept, formalize it, document it, right? It sounds like you could be super helpful in helping people that have ideas. They see market demand, they just don't have the ways to put it together, and that's half the challenge, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely agree with that, Vincent. It's the thing we see all the time, and lots of these companies are founded by clinicians, surgeons, and others who have a medical background, and they've identified a need, and usually they're able to find some philanthropic type funding, friends and family kinds of funding.
Sure.
Maybe former patients, tend to be good sources, right, of funding. You saved my life, or my mom's life, or my wife's life, and I'd love to just repay you. Yes, of course, I'll support your work. So they get these companies off the ground, They have a small team or maybe even a mid-sized team. And then because they're also doing surgery all the time, they're busy. They're not probably the right person to be the CEO long term. Maybe they got the thing off the ground. But the problem is they often make a mistake in choosing their business partners.
Yeah.
That's the thing that we see a lot. I mean, you hear these all the time. I was laughing about this yesterday as we were choosing. So yesterday we had the selection committee meeting for MedTech Innovators 2022 cohort. And we were going from 150 companies that we'd invited to pitch out of over 1,000 applications down to 80 that our various corporate partners had raised their hands and said, I want to work with that company. And we can only have 50 in the program in total. So we were going through to narrow that list down. And one of the companies, all the companies, we always ask them, how was your team formed? Where did you find each other? And you see this, I hear this anecdotally, and it's funny to actually see it in the, in the company's description. And they say like, oh, well, I was working on this. I was the, the clinician and I had a small team. And then I met my co-founder on an airplane. They were sitting next to me in the airplane, and you hear that all the time. It's the person who was next to me and at the DMV waiting for my, my license, and they happen to be a business person. It's the person on the plane. It's the person who happened to be sitting next to me at the conference. And I'm not saying that's not, those serendipities, don't work, but it certainly means they didn't go through a process to say, hey, here's 10 great candidates who could run this company. And I went through a process to figure it out. It's the guy in the plane next to you. And you're like, oh, you busy?
The guy in 2F.
So, we just see too much of that. Unfortunately, we see too many people who, make mistakes in choosing their partner. And then they're stuck with them and they go around and they meet with investors like me. I was a VC for 12 years. And we hear this pitch and, we go, oh my God, Vincent, you're incredible. Andrew, you're incredible. And the work you're doing is really important. Who's this person next to you speaking for you who really doesn't know what they're doing? And they're like, oh, they were very successful in real estate and they know business and they'll figure. And we say, no, we don't want that person, running the, they're not the right person. And you're like, well, I've already given them half the company. And, and you can, and we tell people that all the time. We'll say, this is, I hope you understand this is not the right, you're not the right CEO long-term. Are you okay with that? Maybe right after the funding, we're going to replace you. And if a lot of people are aware and they say, I know I'm not the right person. But a lot of people are like, oh, no, I really know business and I'm the right person. And we go, okay, but we won't write that check. So, it's one minor thing, but I'm just saying we find all the time that we find companies. The reason I would say MedTech Innovator exists, the reason we exist is because these companies, it doesn't matter where they are, whether they're in Europe, Asia, the US, they get bad advice from somebody who's in their local ecosystem. And no one's telling them the truth. And what I mean by that is like, we've all done this. Vincent, Andrew, I promise you guys have done this too,
Sure.
Where we go to these, these kind of pitch formats where like, it's at a university, whatever, and we trot out some, impressive physician or a researcher, and they give us the pitch on their technology, and we all clap and go, wow, that was really great, great job, and nice work. And they walk out of the room, and we all go, oh, that thing's never gonna make it, and no one tells the person the truth. It says, wait, we all talk about it after they leave the room, but we don't tell them these 5 things are gonna prevent you from being successful. And so the reason, as I said, we exist is we want to tell the people, we want to find the things that are high value, high potential, and tell people what they really need to hear, and then give them the right ecosystem so they can succeed.
I mean, your company sounds great because you need to help save doctors from themselves. I mean, we know it as a group, at least, Vince, I should speak for myself, I guess, but doctors are terrible businessmen. I mean, Sure. If there's one thing I've learned is that throughout my years, it just have no concept. It's so it's really great that you exist, and believe it or not, our time has already come to an end.
Oh my gosh, already? Well, I'll say this just to be fair to doctors. business people are terrible doctors. So you don't want,
Yes.
I don't want business people operating.
And politicians are the worst doctors.
They're the worst. They're the worst, but I don't want business people operating on me or taking care of my health. So thank you for doing what you do. And there's a role for everybody. But
Paul, just
thank
in
you.
closing, where are you located again for our audience? You're West Coast based?
Yeah, I'm based in Los Angeles, but we are non-regionally affiliated with anybody. So the companies we work with are from all over the world. We have no particular bias as to where people are based. We just want to find the most important technology and make sure it succeeds in reaching patients wherever it may be. You can find me at medtechinnovator.org. I'm Paul at medtechinnovator.org. And we have an annual program. So, applications always open up in November. But you're welcome to go to our website, and there's a little place you can add your name to an email list where we'll notify you when applications are open. And we see incredible technology from all over the world. As I said, thousands of companies apply every year. And so I encourage you to apply and reach out.
Wow, this has really been helpful.
Super.
So check out our journal at aisjournal.net, all spelled out, aisjournal.net. And I'm gonna stop the recording, but Paul, if we could just talk to you for a few minutes afterwards, that would be great. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.